Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming, where today I'm going to be doing a quick well, maybe not too quick, introduction into the Dresden Files RPG universe. The reason I'm doing this is I'm hoping to run a game over the internet with some other players, and in order, I'm mostly doing this for these other players so that they can have an idea of what to work on when thinking about what characters they want to build. So I'm really new to this universe, we haven't started yet, and because we're playing online, we have big distances, we can't get together a whole bunch and work on the characters together and do all that stuff. So I wanted to give people a head start as far as that's concerned. But if you're just a fan of the channel and you're interested in role-playing games, this might give you a little introduction into the Dresden Files universe too. For those of you who are super into it, or know about it, I may mess up some terminology, some other things. Apologize for that, I'm pretty new to it, but I just want to give a basic overview to the players in my game. So first of all, as far as mechanisms go, there are something called fudge dice. You can actually, these are not them, you can actually buy them if you really want to, or you can just get 4d6, whether you have them from other role-playing games you may have played, or just board games you have lying around the house or whatever. The only dice you need for the game are 4d6 if you don't have the official fudge dice. Basically, the way they're going to function, the regular fudge dice have 2 negative signs, 2 positive signs, 2 blank signs, but you can use d6, as 1 through 2, 2 through 3, and 4, or wait, you know what I mean. 2 numbers are negative, 2 are blank, 2 are positive. And so that's all you really need. So that's pretty cool as far as dice go. You can probably scrounge together 4d6. Next thing we're going to talk about really quickly is fate points. And I'm going to brush over this stuff super quick just to give our players an idea of how the game's going to work and if they want to start working on their character. Fate points are really neat. This game is based on the Fate system, a open free RPG that you can play, and this game really hones in on it, puts it in the Dresden Files universe. The Dresden Files universe, if you're not familiar with it, is a place where wizards and dragons and fairies and vampires and all that stuff is real. Most of the real world doesn't know about it. You could compare it to Harry Potter, I guess, but it's a little bit more adult, a little bit darker. And there's all kinds of craziness, but it is based on the series of books. There is even a briefly run television show as well. You could say grimdark Harry Potter, but the line between magical and not is a little bit odd. There isn't some other different land where wizards exist. They exist in this world, but they're, people don't want to see that and recognize that. But there is a place called the Never Never where basically all this spiritual stuff, the fairies, all that stuff exists. Some places in the Never Never aren't so bad. A lot of them, you probably don't want to spend a lot of time there. But anyways, that's the kind of universe. But fate points are going to be a big part of the game. So basically when you do a roll, let's say you have 2 skill and ability, you start at 2, you roll, you could get anywhere from -4 to +4 based on what you roll. In general, you're not going to get that high, but you could. And then you add or subtract what you get from the fudge dice to that, and then that's your score. You can spend fate points to either improve that by 2 or to re-roll your dice. In general, I think you can spend a fate point to maybe add 1 to it, but that's not very fun. What you want to use is you want to use your aspects. We're going to talk about aspects in a second here. Your character is going to have 7 aspects on their character sheet. The place you're in might have aspects. The enemy might have aspects if you're in a combat or something like that. Aspects are going to be all over the place. And basically, you're going to be calling on those aspects to use your fate points, either to reroll your dice or get +2 or something like that. So, Harry might have an aspect that, he's hungry for power and he's trying to put, more power into a spell successfully. And you could call on that aspect, maybe. However, here's the thing about aspects, though, and we'll get into how you're going to come up with these aspects, but they're meant to be used positively and negatively, because being hungry for power could get you in trouble, especially in this universe where the White Council wardens may be coming after you if you get too hungry for power and getting into black magic or something like that. So one of the ways you're going to be using them is spending them in order to do better stuff. How are you going to get them? Well, as a GM, excuse me, I'm going to be compelling you, basically putting you in bad situations. Oh, you're hungry for power? Well, because of that, this situation comes across where maybe you're getting in trouble because of that, where I'm basically going to offer you a fate point and be like, your character, because of their aspect, they think this is a good idea, and you know full well it's not. You know that's going to complicate your life. So that's a real brief overview of fate points. You're going to spend them to do cooler stuff. I'm going to be on to you by causing complications in your life. You can say no and spend one of your fate points to say no to the compel, but in general, there will be situations you may decide you want to do that. But in general, they're meant to add to the story to give you more opportunities to do cool things. And there are all different other ways they can be used to maybe bring an aspect into an environment, bring an item into an environment, you can compel other players. You can actually spend one of your fate points to try to cause another one of the players in the game as a player to do certain things. So they're a big part of the system. It is called the Fate system that this is based on, so that's no surprise. So now that we've talked about that, let's actually talk a little bit about character creation. We're going to be talking. We're actually going to be talking about the city that we're going to build. The city might, is going to have aspects to it. People within the city are going to have aspects, but we're going to focus more on character creation right now. So when you are building your character, I'm going to go in a second here to Evil Hat's website. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description. If I don't, it's just evilhat.com. Where they're going to have character sheets and all that, and we'll get into how you're going to build your aspects and what your character is going to look like. Alright, here we are at evilhat.com, and then there's all different kinds of resources you can look at on here. But we're just going to look at the character sheet real quick. So this is a game that has kind of a blend of kind of a simple game, like with the dice rolling and things like that, but also a decent amount of minutia in certain aspects of the game. And this is also kind of a blended game as far as storytelling and then the mechanisms and the combat and things like that as well. This whole first character sheet is all about your story and your aspects, and then this is kind of the character sheet with your stats. The rest of these sheets here, the city sheets, you wouldn't necessarily want to print those off. You just want to print the first two sheets of this PDF off in order to check this stuff out. So your character's going to have a character name, your name. Your character's going to have a template. We're going to talk about templates in a moment here, but it's basically, if your character is a human, if they're a wizard, if they're a lycanthrope, whatever. High concept is the main thing of who you are. For Harry Dresden, he is a wizard, private detective, whatever. So kind of who you are, what you do. And a big thing about these aspects, and this is kind of your main thrust, but they're going to be meant, again, to be compelled either positively or negatively, to be used positively or negatively. So for example, the trouble aspect. So there's going to be something that's going to be consistently troubling your character. That can be an external threat, like one of the vampire courts is after your character, or an internal threat. In the example of Harry Dresden, basically that an example they use is maybe he's hungry for power. So that can be a positive thing. He can call upon it, use fate points to, in situations where that lust for power would be a good thing, but that can very much be compelled by the GM also as a negative thing. So keep that in mind when thinking of your aspects, that there's something that should be able to use to help you in situations and also complicate your life. So we already have two aspects here, your concept and your trouble. Now, these next three are going to be about your story. The background you can read a description of, but basically your background, how you grew up, what environment you grew up in, normal, middle-class, suburban, orphan on the street, whatever you want to put there, and you can read a description. But then something about you that came out of that. Again, think something you can use positively or negatively, but how did your, growing up shape you, and think of an aspect for that. The rising conflict. So this is going to be the confrontation that really shaped you. In Harry's case, killing his uncle who had killed his parents when he found out about that eventually, but his uncle who raised him after a certain point, who he found out was a dark wizard, all this stuff. But, some big thing, some big event, and again, you can read a description in your life that shaped you and an aspect from that. And then finally, your story. Now, this is going to be kind of odd. You might think this is the rising conflict. Your story is basically an adventure your character has, and in Harry Dresden's case, they use the first book where, he's trying to work the police to solve a murder, but the wardens think that he's the one who did it and is using black magic, and it can be a real simple tagline. You can have actually, I suggest giving a title to your story, and, when Harry's trying to solve murders, being chased by the wardens, doubted by the police, will he succeed in the face of this, kind of like, almost like you're advertising a radio play or something. So, just a couple lines, real simple, and you don't want to go into detail here, and you don't really want to go into too much detail about these either, but this is something real simple because your adventure is going to be something other characters are going to get involved in, and you're not going to fill out the guest star if you want to print these out and start working on your character before we actually get together to talk for the first time, because these are where other players are going to come into your adventure. So again, All three of these are going to have a story and then an aspect, something about you that came out of that. So we've got 5 so far, so 6 and 7 are going to be where other characters come into your story. You're going to come up with your story, other characters can come in with how they're involved in your story. Not every character has to know everybody in the game, but, every character knows somebody, maybe that character knows somebody else or something like that. And they don't have to know them well. They might have just had a brief encounter in the middle of your story, come across something for some situation, and they could potentially have improved your situation or complicated it. But like I said, we're going to do this together. So between your main concept, your trouble, your 3 things about your background, and then the 2 side characters, you're going to have 7 aspects that can be compelled, that can be used, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the story of your character, and then again you can remark those aspects here. And now we're going to talk about the actual stats of your character. So your skills we're going to talk about here in a moment, but they are going to cost a certain number of points, and then there's a whole list of skills that you can look at. And real quick, we might actually come over here and then check out those skills. So here, if we want to go to this quick reference sheet, we're going to take a quick look at the skills. Here, if you want to look at this, when building your character, here are the skills available in the game, and they give real brief descriptions. There are certain skills you want to focus on, though, if you want to play a certain type of character. Now, the amount of points you have to spend on those skills is going to vary based on the level we're playing at. And we can start with basically where you have 6 refresh, and let's see here, 20 skill points in order to spend at the lowest level, and it goes all the way up to having 10 refresh and what is the number again, and 35 skill points in order to spend. So refresh is, you'll spend them to get these cool abilities here, stunts and abilities based on your character, and you have to have at least 1 left over, and then that's going to be your refresh at the start of every session. If you have less fate points than that, you'll get that many fate points. So the more abilities you have, the less fate points you're going to have to work with. Kind of counterbalances out there. So we're going to talk about the skills first, though. So you do want to take a look at those skills and decide what type of character you want to play. And let's say my group wants to play at the highest level. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to, and they have 35 points to spend. So if you want to be average at something, it costs 1 skill point. You want to be superb at something, it costs 5. And superb isn't even unlocked at the lower levels of power levels if we were to play at them. But if you want to do that, well, here's the deal. You can't have like all superb. Basically, the rule is if you have like 3 of something, you have to have at least 3 in everything below that. So you have 2 of something, you have to have at least 2, whatever. So in any skill, you can't have a skill below it that has less number of skills in it than something above it. So you could do 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, or something like that, but you couldn't do like 2, 2, 3, 2, 2. None of them can be higher than any of them below it, as far as the skills are concerned. And certain skills you're definitely going to want high depending on the character that you're playing as, like presence and conviction if you're going to be a spellcaster, and also lore too. But again, it's going to vary. You could have a spellcaster that isn't very smart that has a low lore ability, but it is going to affect their character. This is basically your stats, if you will. Not stats, but hit points in the game. This is this game's abstraction. So every normal mortal character is going to start with 2 of physical, mental, and social hits that they can take, and they can be increased based on the level you pick in endurance or things like that. I believe if you have like a 1 or 2 in endurance, you get +1. If you have a 3 or 4 or 5, you get +2, and then like you go up to 4 or something like that. I can check on that, but I believe that's how these work. And like if you take 2 damage in a fight, you'd actually mark off the 2. If you take 2 damage again, you'd actually mark off the 3. Let's say you didn't have a 3, then you can either be taken out or take a consequence. And this is all game mechanisms that we'll get into, but that's what the consequences are for. You don't need to fill these in when you're making a character sheet initially. So we've talked about skills, we've talked about how you buy them. Let's talk about stunts and powers. So here I search for Dresden Files stunts, and I'm not even sure if this is an accurate list on the wiki, but there are all kinds of stunts you can have as a character. And if there's a particular stunt you want to make as a character, we can even talk about it. But basically, I believe all these cost you 1 refresh, and they're, depending on what you want to do, if you want to make a character that does a lot of fighting, if you want to make a character that does a lot of talking, whatever, you can pick certain stunts. And a mortal, this is all they're going to have. They're not going to have any abilities. They're just going to have these stunts. But you can take a look at those, see what sounds cool for your character. But let's talk real quickly about the templates, though, because if you want to play a pure immortal, that might sound boring, but trust me, it isn't necessarily boring. First of all, they start with 2 more basically refreshed than other characters, so they just automatically get a +2. So they can get multiple cool stunts and, you know, still have fate points left. And when you use fate points, you can use multiple fate points in one action. You just can't use the same thing more than once, the same aspect. But if you have multiple aspects that apply, you can spend, you know, 2 points to get a +4. If you can find 3 aspects that work in a situation, get +6. You know, maybe there's an aspect on your opponent, one in your environment, and one on you, however you want to work it. So humans can do cool things by getting big rolls and doing really cool stuff, and also by having these cool stunts that you can take a look at. So they're not necessarily boring characters to play. And I'm going to run through super quick the other templates. There's Champions of God, who there's an example of like 3 characters in the universe that have swords that have nails from the actual cross in them. They're, you know, chosen by deity. They have cool abilities. I don't necessarily want my characters to play any of those 3 characters, and they don't even necessarily need to be those types of characters, but they are chosen by deity, and they have some cool abilities based on that. And it's kind of a positive aspect, I guess, chosen by that deity. We'll get into some other potential not so positive aspects of that. There's Changelings. Changelings don't change into other creatures. They actual mind changes. Or excuse me, I'm thinking of lycanthropes. Changelings are actually, sorry, not half creature, half human. They're half fairy, half human. So they don't really change their forms, although their appearance can start changing if they start getting really close to becoming part of the Fae. Basically, you're going to get some cool abilities. How many of these abilities you want to get? There are certain ones you have to take if you're taking this class, but there are other ones you can get. And the thing is you're going to be always tempted to use them to get more. And the more of them you get, eventually your character will change over the game, have a lower refresh, have more abilities. But they're moving towards being completely Fae. And if that ever happens, then you lose control of that character. So that's a risk you run. Emissaries of Power. They are mortals who have been given great power and great responsibility, but this isn't necessarily positive. They've been chosen by, you know, maybe a fairy court, or, you know, something in the Fae or something like that, or the Never Never, where all the magical stuff is, in order to be their hand on the earth or something like that. So they have cool abilities, but they can also be compelled by their masters, if you will, to do certain things. And, you know, there's a cost with that. Focus practitioners, they are basically, they're kind of like wizards, but they only specialize in one thing. Maybe it's pyromancy, maybe they're an alchemist, you know, maybe they specialize, in this world there are 2 types of magic. There's the quick dirty magic, and then there's thaumaturgy that takes a long time, or whatever, maybe that, but you're an expert in one type of magic, and you can even make up what type of magic you want, I mean, with the GM's approval, of course, but basically you're focused on one thing. And there are a bunch of different magic users we'll get into, but that's one type. Knight of the Fairy Court, that would be kind of an example of the Emissary of Power we're talking about, a very specific one, though, where there are 2 main fairy courts. There may have been others, but right now there's the Court of Winter and the Court of Summer. Interested in, like, death and decay and life and growth and all that, but you know, they choose a mortal to do things on Earth. The Lycanthrope I accidentally mentioned before. A Lycanthrope is a character that doesn't like, they're not a werewolf. They, for example, have maybe the spirit of the wolf in them, and it kind of takes over their mind. They still have their mortal body, but they get cool abilities based on that, but they're limited in the times they can do that. And with the actual wolf one, you know, it could be just in a full moon, but that would be kind of boring in gameplay. So if somebody wants to play that, we might change it around, but it's not their body changing, it's more their mind. A minor talent is another type of magical character, but they just have one little trick. There's just one little thing about them that makes them different. Some little thing that they can do that's magical, but they're not like an expert in fire magic. They just have this one thing. So if you want to play a mortal character, kind of, but have just a little quirk about you that you can do something that a normal human shouldn't be able to do, but one particular thing, that's kind of a minor talent. There's Red Court Infected. Red Court are not good. Black Court are kind of the Bram Stoker Dracula Red Court, or, you know, close to that. They are kind of bat creatures that, you know, can appear as human. They're nasty. They want to drink blood and so on and so forth. However, there are red court who can try to fight against that, who can try to, not feed, try to even fight against other red courts, and try to be fine, upstanding citizens. So they have some cool powers and abilities, but they have to deal with the desire to feed and so on and so forth. Sorcerer. Sorcerer is kind of a hedge wizard. They don't have quite as many powers as a full-blown wizard, but they're not part of the White Council. Think of them almost like a gray Jedi. They haven't turned full dark. They're not like a warlock, but they also have the freedom of not being part of the White Council. But the White Council is going to be watching them because they do have a tendency to go dark. So you're not part of that group. You have some degree of freedom. But with that freedom comes, being watched and maybe the temptation to turn to the dark side, if you will. True believers, in this world, faith is super important. Faith powers magic, and not necessarily faith in a god. It could be in the power of magic itself, in your own abilities, whatever. But having faith is important in this game, and true believers could be like a Taoist monk or something that just actually has a level of superpower based on their belief. It could be a Roman Catholic priest who's an actual exorcist and, has abilities fighting demons or something. But basically their true faith has given them some degree of power. They're not magicians, but they have another type of power based on their faith. The were form, that's where you actually can turn into another creature. You still have your mind, but actually turn into, a wolf, a bear, a raven. I don't know. Here's the thing, though. Bear this in mind. If you turn into something bigger than yourself, you're pulling in basically matter from Never Never, which can be dangerous. If you're turning into something smaller, and you can only pick one animal, you can't have you're not like a druid that has 80 different forms they can turn into. But if you turn into something smaller, you're storing your part of yourself in the Never Never and then retrieving it later, which is even more dangerous. They're both dangerous, but that one even more so. We'll talk real quick about the two different types of White Court vampires. Full-blown White Court vampire, they feed more on powerful emotions, often lust, can actually kill feeding off of these powerful emotions, and a White Court vampire has killed at some points, a full-blown one. They're not necessarily evil creatures. It could have been an accident. A lot of White Court vampires don't know they are part of it because they are they're born not made necessarily. So you could have accidentally killed someone that you were with and then found out about it. But there's also White Court virgins. They have a few less powers. They haven't killed yet. If you play one of them, once they kill someone using their powers, go full White Court vampire. Or at some point, if they find true love, basically can go back to being full mortal. But once one of those changes happens, it's permanent. Lastly, we'll talk about full-blown wizard. And like as an example here, to be a full-blown wizard, there are 7 points worth of things you have to buy right away. So even if we're playing at the highest power level, you're already down to 3. If we're playing at the 8th starting power level, you're down to 1 and can't buy anything else. So they can do all the magics. They can choose several different specializations that they're particularly good at. They have evocation, the quick kind of combat magic. They have thaumaturgy, the longer, bigger magic. They have the sight. They have soul gaze. They can do lots of cool stuff, but they do have the White Council kind of looking over them as well. And they could even be part of the White Council. They could be a warden for the White Council if you want to be, Mr. Super Law-abiding sort of thing. So this is, those are kind of the templates there to give you an idea of what sort of characters you might like to play. We can talk about it more in depth, what sort of things you have to take, what the stunts are or whatever, but that should give you an idea of the types of characters available in the universe, what sort of skills you might want to get. So one thing you do want to keep in mind is, like, for example, if you're going to be a spellcaster, we don't need to get too much into this, but you can look through all this stuff here. There is all kinds of cool stuff available here. But, any type of magic user, not even a full type of wizard, like, for example, when you cast a spell, you're going to decide how much power you're going to put into it, and then that's going to be based on your conviction, and then you can, anytime you cast a spell, you're actually going to take 1 point of, like, mental stress, but you can add more power to it by taking more points, but then you're going to roll based on your discipline controlling that power. So the more power you put in, the more possibility you can't control your spell. So discipline is also important. And then lore is particularly important, like for wizards, because you can have certain things that you basically don't really need to control your power on, certain rote spells, basically, that as long as you're not going over your power, then you can just cast them. You still have to try to hit with them or whatever, but you're going to be able to control them all the time. So lore can also be important. So this is a spell sheet like that a wizard's going to want to use. But if you want to be a fighting character, obviously you're going to want like endurance and fist abilities and things like that. If you want to be that, like a Shaolin monk or whatever, you can probably figure out what sort of skills and abilities you want to have. Quick, down near the bottom of this page, there is a 2-sheet reference handout of the different powers, brief explanations. It doesn't have all the details, but again, certain templates you're going to have to take certain things of these, and depending on what type of character you're going to play, you could potentially get more of them. So again, these powers aren't available to normal mortals, and here we have the whole list of and some of these they just give a page reference in the book or whatever. Some of them they try to give a real brief description. But here we can see powers that if you are going to play a character that's say half fae, you're going to be more focused on the fairy magic sort of stuff. If you're going to play a type of vampire, here's more vampire sort of stuff. If you're going to play somebody chosen by God or somebody maybe even with like strong faith, basically depending on what sort of character you want to play, here are some different ideas of what these powers may be. So there are a lot of resources on this website available. Hopefully that will give you guys all the ability to sit down, print out a character sheet, come up with some stories, and have an idea of what sort of stats, skills, and abilities you want. This isn't a full description, but it should be a pretty good start so that when we get together, we can at least have a baseline maybe of, kind of what your character is going to try to go for. I can try to help you from that point, with what sort of stuff you might want to focus on, what powers or abilities you may want, and and we can talk about how we're going to be involved in each other's stories. So hopefully that was helpful for the guys in my group who hopefully we can get together and talk about this next time, or if anyone is interested in the Dresden Files role-playing game, give you an idea of real briefly kind of how some of the base mechanisms work, and also what the character is going to be like. So thanks a lot for watching, and we will talk to you again soon.